Welcome back to a timey-wimey pod where we watch every episode of Doctor Who from 2005 onwards. My name's Rebecca,
I'm Haley.
and today we are discussing Series 2, Episode 4, Girl in the Fireplace.
Yes, we are.
This is a very well-known episode in the fandom and outside of the fandom. I've seen it ranked as one of the best episodes of the show. People have said it's one of Moffat's best episodes. It's one of David Tennant's best episodes. A lot of people love it, and it's very critically acclaimed. But there are some people who don't like it and have very, in my opinion, valid criticisms. And we're going to be talking about all of it.
Yes, we will. But first, we're going to talk about some fantastic facts, which we do at the beginning of each episode. And I love it and hope you guys do as well.
So, this episode aired May 6, 2006, and was written by Stephen Moffat and directed by Euros Lyn. Moffat was inspired to write this episode by the book The Time Traveler's Wife, which I think is funny because that seems to be a big point of inspiration for him. We see that book in 12 TARDIS in Series 8, and River and the Doctor's storyline is very similar to that. And Stephen Moffat wrote the Time Traveler's Wife TV show in 2022 with Theo James. And I was like the only person in the world that liked it, which I understand, but I liked it. But I don't think anyone else watched it. Going off of the Time Traveler's Wife, they were going to have the Doctor and Renette meet out of order. So it would have started with him meeting her, and she would have recognized him from a previous meeting, and then he would have gone back to the ship and met her for the first time. But they scrapped that because they thought it would be too confusing. But I do find it interesting that Moffat kept that idea and, as we know, used it later on for the Doctor and River.
That's what I was going to say. It seems like this idea is not something he forgot.
I think there's a lot of kind of elements in this episode that you can see he kind of picked up on and used later during his term as showrunner. There was going to be a second plot in which the androids didn't really become interested in Renette until the Doctor scanned her mind. And Rose was going to offer Renette a gem that would erase her memory of the Doctor, but she would have refused because, of course, she doesn't want to erase her memories. So that was a plot that almost happened.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think I like the ending we get a bit better. Lastly, this episode was nominated for and won the 2007 Hugo Award for short form dramatic presentation.
I mean, I can totally see why.
I will say I love how this episode looks, from the sets to the costumes, the droids, the heart in the middle of the ship. Oh, it all looks stunning.
And I think it also has aged pretty well for being a 2006 episode of Doctor Who.
Totally.
And I love the aesthetics. I love the music. I love the costumes. And like the styling, I think is really great in this episode.
Now, let's talk about our relationship with this episode overall, because I've had a lot of different feelings about it over the years. As you all know, listening here, we are big Dr. Rose fans. And I feel like this episode is not one highly enjoyed by fellow Dr. Rose stans.
That is putting it mildly. I'm going to be honest. I'm a hater for this episode, but I also really like the concept. And I'm holding space for both emotions, where I like the storyline. I really like Renette on her own. I like how everything looks, but I feel like this entire episode is wildly out of character. I have a lot of problems with it, and I do not think it is Stephen Moffat's best episode.
Oh, I agree. Like you said, I'm holding space for both emotions. There's a lot of things I hate. I don't like at all. and there's a lot of aspects I really like. I kind of have to suspend my disbelief a little bit watching this episode because so many things are just like out of character and feel very disconnected when it comes to Rose and the doctor's relationship in particular. So I definitely have to suspend my belief a little bit watching this episode. So there are aspects I enjoy, and there's a lot of aspects I don't like. But let's just go through it.
So, the way this episode first starts off is a bunch of people running away and screaming, and this woman comes on screen and she says something about a broken clock and that he said he'd be here when the clock was broken. And then she kneels down to the fireplace and says, Doctor, Doctor, are you there?
I always forget that it starts this way.
Yeah, me too. The monster of the week. I was going to say alien, but monster makes a lot more sense for
Yeah.
this episode. The monster of this week are clockwork droids. And when the first one appears in this episode, it pops up from young Renette's bed, from under her bed, and is wearing a mask and a wig. And I just want to say, this was nightmare fuel when I first watched this episode.
Definitely. These clockwork droids look so cool. They're so scary. I love the design.
Yeah.
The ticking is really creepy. I love that scene in Renette's bedroom when you realize the clock is broken. So what's
Mm-hmm.
ticking? So I love that. It's very scary. Great villain design, great concept. We see the clockwork droids once again in the far future, but I want to see them again.
I like their design, but like I said, like when the doctor is in young Renette's room and that broken clock is broken, but you still hear ticking,
Mm-hmm.
and Tin just like looks under the bed, it's freaky and it just like pops up. Um
Totally.
but yeah, love the design of the clockwork droid.
So we first meet Renette as a young 7-year-old girl, and the doctor gets rid of the droid under her bed. I do love that line when Renette is like, "Well, what do monsters have nightmares about?" And he just says, "Me," and the door opens. That
Yeah,
is a
then
great
he
moment.
it's a great moment. He just like hits the fireplace, it turns around and he disappears. I do want to say this is very specific. I do like the concept of the fireplace. Like I think that's really cool.
Oh, me too.
I think the time window concept is really interesting and I don't have a problem at all with like the clockwork droids and like the whole relationship with the ship and how they're looking for one last part to fix the ship. What I do have a problem with is how Ten treats Mickey and Rose, specifically Rose in this episode, because in
Hmm.
school reunion, he literally told Rose she was not going to end up like Sarah Jane. Then this episode comes up and he abandons her more
Yeah.
than once for Madame De Pompadour.
Literally the whole episode, he's constantly leaving her behind on this cannibalized spaceship. And that also bugs me. But what I also don't like about this episode, and Moffat has done this before, or will do this again, I should say, but the doctor meets Renette as a child and then seconds later meets her as a young adult, and instantly they have this like weird flirty back and forth connection, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, why are we
No,
doing this? This is weird. You
this
just
is
saw her as a 7-year-old like 2 seconds ago.
yeah, and it's not even that. Like he says goodbye to child Burnett, and then when he comes back, he's like, "Oh my gosh, you've like grown," and then they kiss.
That kiss is so long, by the way. It's so long.
It's ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we get this kiss, and then we get a fake kiss by Cassandra in New Earth, but no actual kiss between Rose and Tim. You know what? My 13-year-old self is coming through at this moment.
It's offensive. It's
It is.
downright offensive. The hate, the disregard for all that we've built.
Exactly. And I think a huge problem I have with this episode is towards the end. We can talk about it. I think we're going to be all over the place with this episode.
Yeah.
But at the end of this episode, when Tin saves the day and saves Renette from all the clockwork droids trying to kill her and like everyone else, he purposely crashes through the time window with Arthur the horse, which we'll get to him in a minute. I do love Arthur the horse.
Love
Um,
Arthur.
he's great. Um, he purposely crashes through the time window knowing there's no way back. And he's just like
Hmm.
fine chilling with Renette.
Yeah,
And he leaves Rose and Mickey.
no regard to Mickey and Rose stuck there in space 3,000 years into the future. And yeah, he like, I mean, of course he's gonna smash through. Of course he's the doctor, but still, like, the utter lack of regard for like Rose and Mickey's safety throughout this episode is so frustrating. And all the times that he leaves Rose behind and she's just stuck standing there waiting. I do love the moment though when it goes from Rose looking up at the stars in the spaceship to him in the house looking up at the stars. That is a
Oh,
really
yeah.
nice moment, a connection between them. But no, I absolutely hate it. And then when he is stuck there, for a moment he does think he's going to be stuck there forever. It's like he's not even thinking about them.
Exactly. Like, he doesn't even have a backup plan. Like, if it wasn't for Renette being like, hey, I basically like made an exact replica of the fireplace that you came through when I was a kid. You can go back to the spaceship this way. But without that, what was he going to do? Because the TARDIS couldn't travel back in time. And I saw a lot of reviews confused with this, but we see this concept later on, an example for the Angels Take Manhattan, where
Hmm.
when a death is established or events have been established, the Doctor cannot go back in time with the TARDIS or basically makes this big paradox.
Right. Though I did kind of think, and obviously Rose and Mickey can't fly the TARDIS, but if they could just go pick up the doctor.
That is true. They could basically be like, hey, Doctor, come to Bad Wolf Bay in 17, whatever year it is.
17, whatever. Let's talk about what Rose and Mickey are doing in this episode because they're
Yeah.
very much like they're doing stuff, but I wish they were way more involved in the plot of
Yeah.
this episode.
Like, we might as well not even have them. Like, that's how I feel. Just
Yeah,
because of how much of
pretty
a backseat they
much.
take.
And I do love the moments we get. Like, I love when Rose and Mickey wander off, and Mickey's like,
Yeah.
he said not wander off. And she's like, yeah, I know. And then they
She's
wander
like,
off, of course. And I do love Rose's hair in this episode. The
her hair is
short,
great.
curly hair. It's so fun.
And I do love the moment when she's telling Ted, no, you can't bring the horse.
You can't bring the horse. I let you keep Mickey. No, that is so funny.
Yeah, that is a great moment. And then,
We see Rose and Mickey wandering through the spaceship, and we see an eye in the camera and a heart wired
mhm,
up, and it all looks really good. Like the effects of really, the eye and the camera look a little funky, but
yeah.
nothing too crazy. But it held up really well.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's also really interesting as a concept that like the clockwork droids killed the entire crew because they didn't know they were off limits and the ship was in
Hmm.
disrepair. And so they were like, let's kill all of these people and use their body parts to fix the ship. Like, that's
That is
so
just
wild.
horrifying. So scary.
Yeah.
I do really like the scene between Ten and Renette when he looks through her mind. Specifically, I like the part where she can see into his mind as well.
Really interesting you say that because I have beef with this scene.
Oh, okay, do tell.
Okay. My beef with this scene is more that it happens in this episode with Renette versus someone like Rose or even someone like Donna in the future. Like, this is a one off character we see in one episode and not someone that has built this like series long relationship with the doctor. Like, it doesn't even have to be Rose. I just have a problem with it being Renette. And I do like the sentiment of like someone understanding like his mind and just his life. I just don't love how it came about.
I do hate that this episode is supposed to be like the love story, like the doctor's love story episode, because we already have it. Like, we're already doing it. Like, are we
Yeah,
forgetting the plot of our own thing? Like, we're watching it. And now we're doing this like side thing for what? What is the point?
I completely agree with you. I really don't know. I don't know what Moffat's mindset was at the time regarding Rose.
Moffat hates Tenrose. So that's my theory. Oh, I also
I
love the moment when Mickey's like, "What's 17th century?" Or no, he's like, "What's a horse doing on a spaceship?" And the doctor's like, "Mickey, get some perspective. What's 17th century France doing on a spaceship?"
Yeah, that was a absolutely hilarious moment. Um, the moment where they're all looking through the glass at one point, like 10, Rose, and Mickey,
Mm-hmm.
and like they're pointing out the King of France and they're talking about Renette and how she's Madame De Pompadour and how she was the mistress of the King of France at the time. And I think it's really funny that Rose comments, she's like, "Oh, so she's Camilla."
I love that. It's so Rose. Like, you can totally see like Rose
Mm-hmm.
and Jackie talking about
Yep.
Princess Diana and Camilla. You can see them having those conversations. So I love that she gives that line. It's so funny, so cheeky, so Rose.
Completely agree. What are your thoughts on the moment where Mickey is like, so first I heard Jane, now Renette, and then he mentioned Cleopatra. He called her Cleo. Like, basically, what do you think, Rose? Like, why are you still here? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
First off, our first Cleopatra mention and not our last. So
Hmm.
let's keep track, because she gets mentioned a lot, and I want to know the backstory. Second off, I hate that I told you so, and in a sense Mickey is a little bit valid, because like she did leave him for the doctor, and she has like gone on all these like grand speeches being like he's different and blah blah blah. So you understand where Mickey is coming from. Like, he, of course, he wants to relish in his "I told you so" moment, but like we said in the last episode, I don't like it. Like, give her a moment. It's not the time and the place. And it just bugs me when he's trying to like downgrade their relationship and make her doubt, her
Yeah,
connection with the doctor.
I agree with you. And I think, actually, I don't know if it could have been written any better. I don't love the I told you so thing from
Especially
Mickey.
when we already got it last week.
Yeah. And it's like a consistent part of his character at this point, it feels.
One thing I wanted to mention is the scene in which the doctor looks into Renette's mind and she's able to look into his. I really like how they talk about the doctor being a lonely boy, a lonely child, which is so
Yeah.
sad and fits very well within the current context of the show. And she also talks about Doctor Who. It's more than a secret, isn't it? Which is also something that comes up later in Moffat's run as showrunner. So I love the little accidental Easter eggs for the future we see in this conversation.
I agree with you. I think it's really funny.
I don't like when they go dancing. We don't have to see them go dancing, but like, why like she decides to dance with him before she dances with the King of France, and she's like, there comes a time when every lonely boy must, or whatever she says something about when every lonely man needs to dance, and it's like, okay, he's fine.
He's fine. He danced last season. Like, I don't know what you're on about, but like, okay, Renette.
Moffat, he literally danced in your last episode. Check your notes. Your last episode was called "The Doctor Dances."
Yeah, Moffat, you need to check your history. I do agree with you. If Moffat made and put in the effort to have like this scene included and this mention of them dancing, they should have had like a brief clip of them dancing.
But I do like the juxtaposition of when Mickey and Rose are tied up, and then we see the doctor drunkenly coming in, singing,
Mm-hmm.
rambling about who knows what. One of my favorite exchanges is when Rose says, "Look what the cat dragged in, the oncoming storm." And
Storm.
Ten says, "Oh, you sound like your mother." It's so funny. It's so old married couple. I love it.
Mm-hmm. I feel like this scene is out of character for 10, but I
Mm.
also like this scene where he's really drunk and feels it redeems this episode more for me. And I love the mention of how he's like, always bring a banana to a party, bros.
Bananas are good.
They're brilliant.
Yeah. No, I do love the banana connection continuing.
And then 10 saves Rose and Mickey and gives the clockwork droid some sort of oil that they thought was wine and had the glass in his hand, and that powers them down so that Mickey and Rose can escape. And then it's a race against time, trying to get these clockwork droids to stop trying to kill Renette. They think because the ship is 37 years old, that when Renette turns 37 years old, that's when she'll be complete and ready to be killed for whatever they need from her body to fix the ship.
I love how throughout the episode Rose is the only one that's asking, "Okay, well, why this girl? Like why her?"
Mm-hmm.
And everyone else is like, "Oh, who cares? Doesn't matter."
I'm like, it does matter. Like, it's so random.
Yeah. Like maybe figure that out, but I guess they were busy. Also, one moment I also like is when Rose gets to go talk to Renette.
Yeah, I like that moment when she's like, in 5 years' time, they're coming, the
Mhm.
clockwork droids are coming, you have to be ready. And it's just her and Renette. And the moment where Renette says, we both know the doctor's worth fighting monsters for.
We know
What are
the
your
doctor's
thoughts?
worth the monsters. I
Yeah,
love that
that's it.
line. It always
Yeah.
lives rent free in my mind, and it's definitely something I think Rose understands quite a bit, and every companion for that matter. So I love it. It's always in my head rent free. Use that line in more edits, everyone. It's great. But yeah, I love this whole conversation between the two of them and how Burnett like demands Rose explain the whole thing to her, and she's able to understand it and understand that she's on the slow path. I forget what the context is because I didn't write it down, but there is one moment where she calls Rose a child, and that was personally offensive to me personally when I was watching this.
Yeah. Like, what was the age difference in that scene? Like, it
I know.
wasn't
I'm like,
a crazy
okay,
ton of time.
she's not a child.
No. It felt a little patronizing, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. But overall, I did really like this scene, and apparently, most of it had been cut in the original cut of the episode, but Moffat demanded that the director put in the whole scene, and I'm really glad he did that because I think this scene is great, and I love the
Mm-hmm.
conversation they have, and when she says the monsters and the doctor, it seems like you cannot have one without the other. And then she later, when she says the doctor's worth the monsters, I love that line and connection, and it just it's so poignant. It really encompasses so much of the show. So I love that line.
And as much as I have my problems with this episode, I do really, really like the character of Renette, and I do think she is well written and that she has
Definitely.
a lot of dimension. I think she's a wonderful character in this episode, and I don't hate her at all. I think she's really great.
And I think the actress nailed the role. She's so
Mm-hmm.
intriguing. So, like, you can't help but watch. And the way she talks and moves and performs, she's fantastic in this episode.
She is.
Okay, one thing I noticed in this rewatch that I never noticed before is that the doctor defeats the clockwork droids by telling them it's over, just give up, and they do. They just give up and stop.
Yeah, they do that because even they know, I guess, that the time windows really are severed and they can't get back on the spaceship, but like,
Oh,
it's
true.
too easy.
Yeah, it just that's it. Like, we did all this work, we built all those windows, we waited for her to be 37, and now we just give up. They're like, they just power
Stop.
down. They're like,
Yeah,
we're stopping. We're done.
we're done.
Like, you
The
cannibalized the whole crew to keep this ship going, and now you're like, well, we're done. Oh well.
Yeah, like you're not just gonna wait for the future.
Yeah. So even though like there are consequences in the doctor's actions, I found it was just wrapped up too easily. Like, they're defeated too quickly, and I get that they're not the focus of this episode. Like, the characters are more of the focus, but still.
Still, there should have been something.
Mhm.
And then after they're defeated, Renette is like, "But you can't go back now." And he's like, "Yeah, I know." And she's insistent that he finds a way to get back. Like, she's the one that brings him to the fireplace to get back to his TARDIS and back to Rose and back to Mickey. And I just want to ask 10, why did it take this wonderful woman to convince you and force you to go back on the spacecraft? Why didn't you want to do it on your own? Like, what about not leaving Rose behind? Literally, in Tooth and Claw, you screamed and well, didn't scream, but like you yelled and was like, "Where's Rose? Where is she?" And school reunion, you were like, "Oh my gosh, Rose, I will never treat you like I treated Sarah Jane. I regret Sarah Jane." And then he just is like, "You know what, Burnett? I'll stay with you for however long."
I'll take the slow path. I'll get money and pay for the damages and blah blah. Yeah, it is so out of like I wish we saw him worrying more, or maybe even just saying like, I love the slow path, but my friends are stuck and I can't
Mm-hmm.
help them. I don't know what to do. And I do really like when she says, "Oh, it's quite sad. I would have enjoyed the slow path," and then she shows him the fireplace, and he's like,
Yeah,
"Well, if I'm very, very lucky, this will work." And he says, "Wish me luck." And her face is so sad. And she says, "No." And so I really do like that. I thought that was really well done. And then he
yeah,
gets to the other side, back on the ship, and he tells her to pack a bag and pick a star, which that is also very out of character. Like, he knows
yeah.
this is a historical figure and he's willing to take her out of her timeline. Say they even just go for one trip. You never know what's going to happen on that one trip.
Exactly.
Anything could have happened, and then time would be fractured, time would be rewritten.
Yeah, I don't know what that Time Lord was thinking in this episode.
Oh, I hate in the scene after he jumps in the mirror and Renette introduces him to the king, and she's like, "This is my lover, the king of France." And he's like, "Yeah, well, I'm the lord of time." It's like, okay, why are we trying to flex? Like, who are you trying to impress? And it's just so, I hate it. The like cocky hero. It's just so, it's not the doctor. It's so, oh, I hate it.
I'm not gonna lie to you, I completely forgot about that whole exchange. So when I was watching this earlier, I died watching this. It was so funny to me in the cringiest way.
Yeah.
Yeah, why are we flexing? This is not something to flex about.
No, I don't like it. Let's talk about the brief 5-second reunion that the doctor has with Rose, and you find out they waited 5.5 hours for him.
And how long did he try to get back there? Oh, 2 seconds once Burnett
Two
forced him to.
seconds. Mm-hmm. And then immediately he goes back right away. No care in the world.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Hi, gotta go. Be right back."
Ugh, yeah.
But this
But
time,
then,
when he goes back, he's too late, and we find out that Renette passed away quite young. She passed away at 43. And the king gives him a letter that she wrote for him. I really don't like. What do you think of the moment when the king asks what she said in the letter and he just puts it in his pocket? Like, this king actually knew her, actually loved her. You've known her for 30 minutes.
yeah, I don't know how to feel. I think he probably knew he was going to get a little emotional, which he kind of did in the TARDIS. Like,
Yeah,
that was
definitely.
kind of crazy. Made sense, though. It made sense based on like the
It
whole
makes sense,
episode.
but yeah.
But yeah, the king is just there, and Ten is like, I'm still the Lord of Time. Like, it's just weird.
Yeah, it's really weird. The letter is so sad though, because she never
Mm-hmm.
gave up on seeing him again. And she says, my days are shorter and I grow weaker. And she just wants to see him one last time. And quite often he was too late. And I do find that really sad. And him
Yeah, I did too.
sadly reading the letter in the TARDIS is definitely, I don't know, it's a good way to end it. I think it wrapped it up quite nicely.
I agree. And then Rose asks him, before he reads like this letter,
Hmm.
Rose asks him one last time, why do you think the droids picked Renette? And Tin is like, I don't think we'll ever know. And then flash forward to the very last scene, we see that the spaceship that they had landed on was called the SS Madame De Pompadour.
I love that last minute
Yeah.
twist. There's always a twist at the
At the
end.
end.
And I love that. I love that they did that. I think it just ties it all together really perfectly. It makes sense. You immediately understand why the droids were doing this whole time. So I love that last minute detail. I think it's great.
I agree with you. And I have one last question regarding this episode for you.
Oh,
We mentioned this in the beginning about like how critically acclaimed this episode is, how many people love this episode. There's also a lot of people that believe this episode is the perfect introductory episode.
ugh.
What are your thoughts?
No. Okay, the perfect introduction episode discourse really annoys me because people will
Yeah.
bring up this. They'll talk about Blink, and I'm like, why would that be the first episode you introduce someone to the show? If you're gonna do a first episode, first off, don't skip 9. Just start at Rose. But if you have to skip 9, do New Earth, do the 11th hour, do the pilot. Like, there's so many better options. Why would you start with the girl in the fireplace?
Yeah. I don't fully know why everyone thinks it's the perfect introductory episode. It's not. It's really not.
No.
If you want my take, if you're trying to get someone, like you're really trying to get someone to watch Doctor Who and get them hooked, I would nominate the 11th hour as one of the options.
Yeah, it's a great starting point. What I've tried to do is like just watch series 1. Just watch the whole of series 1,
Yes.
and if you
Yeah.
don't like it, fine, but just give it a chance,
Yeah.
please.
Give it a
And you know
chance.
what? Usually they're hooked quickly by Father's Day, by The Empty Child, by The Slitheen. They're hooked pretty quickly. So just get them to watch that first series and they're there. What is the heart of this episode for you?
The heart of this episode is,
The heart of this episode is always bring a banana to a party.
you know what?
Bananas
We're
are
going with
good.
yours.
Who is the star of the show for you?
I mean, I do have to say the star of the show for me is Renette.
I
I
agree.
think Sophia Myles did such a wonderful job portraying her. She was really captivating the whole time. And like I said, as a character, I really do like Renette.
I completely agree. Her character's so interesting. The performance is really intriguing. It keeps your attention throughout. So yeah, it has to go to her. Do we have any reviews from the past?
We do, and they're all from IMDb.
Ooh.
In an April 2017 IMDb review, user JackBV123 said, "These were the days that cemented the 21st century Doctor Who as a cult classic, and it's episodes like this that did it. This is one of the all-time great episodes, and it was not even a season premiere or finale or Christmas special. Stephen Moffat shows why he is the real genius, not Davies." The last episode was about Rose seeing a companion who was left behind and parsing the emotions that go with that. This episode is about Rose looking at the wonder in another woman's face who appreciates what Rose is living. Rose gets to think about that and what a companion Madame De Pompadour could have been. Madame De Pompadour was a genius in her own right, and her intuition is brilliant. Had she become a long-term companion, she would have surpassed them all. The genius of Moffat is in giving us a love story within the sci-fi mystery and adding nostalgia to it. Through the Madam, we get a peek into the heart of the Time Lord. Despite the confusion and sadness and even anger that must be in that mind, she falls in love with someone greater than the King of France. This is the 10th Doctor at his best, and he is probably the only one of the new Doctors who could have made this connection with this woman.
That I do agree with, but again, I don't like the connection. The whole ground that this episode stands on, I don't like, because he meets her as a 7-year-old and then seconds later she's a fully grown woman, and it's weird.
It's weird, and there's no like, yeah, there's that.
Yeah,
It's just weird.
it's just weird.
I also low-key think they're reaching just a little bit when they say this episode is about Rose looking at the wonder in another woman's face who appreciates what Rose is living. Where'd you get that from?
Yeah, where? Where'd that come from? I love the delusion that we have for Rose, but
Yeah.
Rose and Mickey are just so underutilized. Like half the time in this
Yeah.
episode, Rose is just staring sadly as the doctor like leaves her somewhere on the spaceship.
And like I said, it would have almost been better if Rose and Mickey weren't in this episode.
Yeah, or just bring them along when they go to
Yeah.
France. Like, I don't know, just give them more to do. Or, yeah, make it a companion light episode.
Absolutely agree.
Who, out of all the other Doctor companion duos we have, who would you rather see in this episode?
Who would I rather see, or who do I think could pull it off?
Who do you think would be good in this?
I think the 11th Doctor would be good in this kind of
Oh,
episode.
interesting. I was thinking the 12th Doctor or the ninth Doctor would be really fun if they like didn't do the romance aspect.
I was going to say there's no way 9 would do the romance aspect. There's
No.
no
Or
way.
12, frankly.
No.
But yeah, I want them because I don't want the romance aspect of this episode.
No, that's
so
so
why I
fair.
think it would be fun. Yeah, I think 9 would be like 9. I just think the ninth Doctor would be really great in this, and I think 12 and Bill specifically would be really fun and have a lot of fun on the spaceship with the horse and 17th
They
century
would.
France. Mm-hmm.
This episode would have slapped with Bill and 12.
It would have. It really would have. Oh my gosh! And Bill's reaction to the ship would have been so funny.
Oh my gosh. Moffat, you should have saved this for season 10.
Saved it.
Okay, so this next review is from April 30th, 2008 by Theo Robertson. And he rated it a 3 out of 10 and said, I've got to confess, I thought this episode was complete and utter rubbish. The plot is absolutely threadbare and is stretched out for 45 minutes, and that's one of the nicer things that I can say about the episode. What's the worst thing I can say? How about Noelle Clarke only gives the second worst performance in the episode because the worst performance comes from David Tennant.
Oh.
Yeah. That's right, the actor playing the title character in the show gives the worst performance. And after seeing this, I started to think that recasting Colin Baker or Sylvester McCoy would have been a massive improvement. Honestly, Tennant is an absolute embarrassment, especially the scene where he appears drunk. There's a school of thought that this, quote, bad acting, end quote, is deliberate on the part of the Doctor, but that's total hyperbole. And it's painfully obvious that Tennant, a self-confessed fan of the show, is enjoying himself too much. Not helped by the fact that Sophia Myles was at the time his partner in real life.
I disagree. David's performance is not one of the issues I have with this episode,
No.
but I'm also very biased, and I would watch David Tennant do anything.
I agree. I don't think Mickey is the greatest in this episode, but I also don't think Noel Clark is bad
Yeah, I don't
acting.
think his performance is like no, I don't think he's a bad actor per se. But
Yeah.
yeah, that is a very random shot taken. He's just there for the comedy. You can't be mad.
He's just Ken.
He's just Ken. Oh my gosh. He really is.
The last review I have is from April 2007 by the user Dr. Wordsmith, and they said, "This has to be my favorite episode of Doctor Who of all time. It is so well put together, well acted, cleverly made, and touching. The premise is rather complicated but told very well. The episode is missing a decent set of bad guys, the clockwork men and women are chilling, but hardly a match for the Doctor and his companions. The music in this episode is particularly good. The song Madame De Pompadour is used particularly well throughout. And of course, when Renette eventually dies, the acting and dialogue is pulled off remarkably well. The music is chilling, and even Billie Piper pulls off her reduced role very well. By far, the best episode of the series, and even better than last series' episode, Father's Day."
Oh no. This is not better than Father's Day.
No, it's
That
not.
that feels like a shot to the gut. How dare you say that about Father's Day? Yeah, I feel like I've already said all my issues with this episode.
Same.
I in my mind when I think about the best episodes of Doctor Who, this is not one I think about. And maybe that's just my personal bias. Maybe I'm too biased for Ten and Rose, and you know what? I don't care.
I also don't care because I also never have this episode in the running. And my
Mm-hmm.
best episode list, best Stephen Moffat episode list, my favorite episodes list, it's not there. It's near the bottom. I'm sorry. It's the truth.
Yeah.
I have too many problems to rate it higher.
Mm-hmm. But let us know what you guys think. Do you find it one of the best episodes of the show? Do you love it? Or are you like us and there's good parts, but you have a lot of problems? Let us know because I really want to know what people think about this episode today.
I completely agree with you. But thank you guys so much for listening. We will be back next week with talking about the two-parter Rise of the Cybermen and Age of Steel. We will be talking about both of those episodes in one podcast episode next week.
Mm-hmm. So you'll definitely want to tune in for that. But until then, make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at TimeyWimeyPod.
And email us anything and everything to timeyimeypod@gmail.com. And don't forget to rate us on your favorite podcast platform.
And we'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Bye, guys.